The problem is almost never what you think it is. If you wake up tired, you come home exhausted, even though you eat well, you train, and the scale still doesn't move, that's not a discipline problem, but a pattern problem. And today I'm breaking down the 4 metabolic patterns that I see the most. So by the end, you'll know which one is yours and how to address it. Pattern number 1 is cortisol dominance. That's when your body is stuck in survival mode. So the more training you add and the more you're reducing the food, the less you're eating, the worse this gets. Typical signs are more belly fat when you have especially stressful periods, also waking up at 2 to 3 a.m., having this feeling of being tired but wired, crashing after exercise. And another typical thing is when you're suddenly losing fat when you're on vacation, because for the first time you're relaxing and reducing the cortisol levels. So if we sum this up, the more pressure you add, the more cortisol rises and the more fat gets stored. Unfortunately, especially visceral fat. A lot of examples of clients coming to me training 4 to 5 times a week if we add everything up, the classes, the running, the strength training, and then when I ask them how much they're eating, I find out just by asking them what they're typically having and the amounts of what they have, they probably eating around 1,200 to 1,400 calories, and they're still losing weight, and if anything, even slowly gaining weight, which from like a calorie in versus calorie out perspective doesn't make any sense, but that's the pattern that they're stuck in. The increase in cortisol, because hormones affect, right? Biochemistry affects if you're gaining or losing weight. So chronic stress essentially pushes the body towards more, especially central fat storage. That's the biochemical background, and that usually also makes sleep, cravings, and recovery worse. And over time, of course, you're not going to be able to stick with your 5 sessions. And very little caloric intake, but if you're very driven and motivated, you're doing that for a long time, and that's when we see like the typical burnout patterns as well, if you're doing that for too long and in too intense way. And also to emphasize, this is not to diagnose anything, we're not talking about any diseases, we're talking about patterns that have to do with your habits and with your lifestyle that also of course affect biochemistry and physiology, but this is not to diagnose any disease or illness, just typical patterns and how to get out of them. So that was pattern 1. Pattern 2 is about your fuel, so to say, specifically why your body can't access fat as fuel, even though you're eating clean. So let's get into pattern 2. Pattern 2 I like to call blood sugar dysregulation, and that's when your metabolism, so to say, is running on a broken fuel system. That's when you experience also energy swings, you feel shaky when you're skipping meals, or you experience also cravings in waves, like no cravings after your meal, then 1 hour later you have a lot of cravings again, or if you feel foggy, like brain fog after eating, also a common sign for that. So without stable blood sugar, which is the whole physiological basis of that, without stable blood sugar, the body never gets a clean signal to burn fat, and you're not getting into that fat burning mode, and you're always just accessing carbohydrates and sugar as fuel. And for that, as in how we address that, the meal timing and structure, as in what to eat, also how much, of course, to an extent, but the timing and the what are the biggest levers, not restriction and not necessarily the amounts, which of course also play a role, but only secondarily. Typical examples of that pattern are when women come to me experiencing energy crashes, even though they're eating clean, so to say, they experience cravings in the afternoon. And the basis of that really is that when you have this blood sugar roller coaster, because that lack of structure and timing, as I said before, then of course that also affects insulin. So insulin gets secreted a lot. And when you're secreting a lot of insulin, your body is in storing mode, because insulin puts sugar and also fats into your cells, and therefore to an extent also prevents you accessing fat as fuel and as your primary energy source. So it's always just the sugar that is being accessed, and therefore it's harder to lose fat over time. That was pattern 2. Let's get into pattern 3. This is actually the one that surprises most women. It's really interesting because it's really counterintuitive. So when someone comes to me saying that they have been dieting and restricting their caloric intake for years, more than 5 years, maybe even decades, maybe even since their 20s, that's when my first guess is pattern number 3, metabolic slowdown. That's essentially when years of restriction have down-regulated your metabolic output, so to say, as in the amount of calories that you're burning throughout the day. It's when you're eating very little, but your results actually got worse over time. And of course the other patterns, stress, blood sugar, play into that as well. But if that's the dominant one, your body has essentially adapted and it now burns less. It has a decreased metabolic rate compared to its natural metabolic rate. And the path forward, of course, is not just eating less and less, because you're going to adapt more, and that's why I said it's kind of counterintuitive. The path to lose more is to eat more. Eat more to lose more. So we need to learn to eat more strategically. Of course, you're afraid of that in the beginning if that's your pattern, but that's the path forward instead of just eating less. And typical signs when someone comes to me next to them saying that they have been dieting for years is also that they eat less than most people in their environment, and they're jealous about the ones in their friend circle that just eat whatever they want and they can still lose weight, and then probably that's not you. But also when you're cold often, right, because your metabolism also has to do with your body temperature. If your hair is thinning, if you're exhausted even after you're sleeping, that's like all this, right, when I'm checking that with clients in the metabolism mastery system, we're essentially doing a hair mineral analysis to find out about their metabolic pattern, and then right, they're getting into this slow oxidizing pattern, which is like a type 2 metabolism. And that can even be the case if you're naturally type 1 metabolism, but you restricted so much that your body just slowed down so much, your thyroid slowed down so much that you're now type 1 that turned type 2, but that's for a different day. And the physiological background behind that is that essentially caloric restriction decreases the conversion of T4, right, or thyroid hormone, into the active form of that thyroid hormone, which is called T3. And also stress plays into that, right? Chronic stress also decreases that conversion. So again, these patterns are intertwined, of course, as you can imagine. But the restriction slows down that conversion. Also, a lot of carb restriction, doing keto, doing low carb, especially if you're not genetically predisposed to doing such a diet, will lower the conversion of T4 to T3, and that's like what's behind that metabolic slowdown. So your metabolic rate is decreased. That was pattern 3. Next up, the last one is the most underdiagnosed, so to say, because again, we're all kind of facing that pattern to an extent. It's not a do you have it or don't you have it, it's a question of to what extent do you have it. Pattern number 4 is about our bodies constantly having to repair and heal itself, which is something healthy, because inflammation is a healing process, is a repairing process, which is important. But that's also, by the way, why it's called silent inflammation, pattern number 4. If it's constantly going on, you're constantly inflamed, and that's what's not healthy anymore. And the reason we can get into such a pattern is that nowadays in our modern industrialized Western worlds, what's happening is that we're constantly exposed to environmental and other stressors. Some examples are air pollution, water pollution, the fact that we're constantly connected, constantly someone can call you, can text you, so the psychological effect this has on you, never really having a break, but also really pragmatic, the electromagnetic radiation, which is researched and well known to affect your body and lead to inflammation. So these constant stressors, next to also, by the way, which is not directly a stressor, but also leads to stress over time, the fact that we have less minerals and vitamins in our soils, in our fruits, in our foods generally, also is a stressor indirectly. And that leads to constant silent inflammation and repairing process, which via certain inflammatory cytokines affects, for example, insulin signaling, leads to insulin resistance, makes fat loss harder, and essentially affects every cell, every system in our body, because inflammation is something that puts you, there's also something like global inflammation that puts you in a constant repairing process. So you know the 4 patterns. Now the question is, how do you find out which one is yours? So let's find out which one is yours. And before we get into that, this is not about diagnosing anything, right? We're not talking about diseases. We're talking about lifestyle choices that lead to certain patterns that then affect, of course, also your physiology. But it's not about finding any conditions or diseases and any illnesses. But if you look at the signs that I described, which would be step number 1, then you can first of all ask yourself which pattern sounds like you the most from the 4 patterns I mentioned. The second thing that you can do next to your experience is you can take my free metabolic assessment. It essentially walks you through 5 questions and then gives you the answer, right? Which of the 4 patterns is yours? And for that, you just reach out via WhatsApp or Instagram at Philipp Ebert C, or also show my WhatsApp number here on the screen. and just write me like want the quiz or something, and I'll send you the link. You can just answer the 5 questions, and then within 2 minutes it will send you your personalized results to your WhatsApp. And you can also do a free metabolic assessment after you've done the quiz, to find out and talk from someone in the team, find out exactly what's driving your results and what to address first. After all, you're not stuck because you lack discipline, but because you're focusing on the wrong problem. And you can also, of course, only make progress if you're focusing on the right thing. And to do that, you, of course, first of all need to find out which one is yours. So if you want to get more clarity on that, then just on Instagram or WhatsApp, DM me quiz, so I can send you the link for the free assessment. See you in the next one.